things that I've been praying is, God, let me see it like you see it. Because if I can see it the way God sees it, then what happens is it causes me to condition myself to behave properly. All right. I see y'all look like I'm crazy. All right. If I don't see it properly, then what happens is I will behave in a way that will cause me to miss what God has. All right, y'all don't believe it? While we sit up here being deep and spiritual, Moses is the leader, anointed, trained by God, called by God to take the people out of Egypt and to take them into the promised land. But Moses responds in the flesh. Now, Numbers chapter 20, the Bible says that he tells him to speak to the rock. Oh, I don't have time to really work on this. He tells him to speak to the rock because God was, number one, he wanted to be sanctified in the eyes of the people. But number two, God was transitioning the people from having to have signs and wonders to dealing with the word and moving by faith. And the Bible says that Moses got upset with the people, and instead of speaking to the rock, he smites the rock the second time. And then God says, because of your behavior, Moses, not only are they not going in, but now you're not going in. How is it that you are the deliverer, the one that's anointed to take them in, but you get to the end and you can't go in? I know, it's okay. Y'all looking at me, y'all still getting used to me. You gotta understand. There was a man, Friedrich Nietzsche, he made a statement. He says, all things are subject to interpretation. Whichever interpretation prevails at a given time, he says it is a function of power and not truth. It is a function of power and not truth. All right, let's explain this. In other words, you have to understand, in all of us, there are two natures. All of us, there are two natures. I don't have time to deal with this. We know the word. There are two natures working in us. So when I come into a situation, the question is, how do I see what I'm dealing with? Do I see it from the natural or the flesh or the carnal place? Or do I see it through the eyes of the Spirit? Y'all stay with me. I promise I'm all in the text. Do I see it from my natural perspective, or do I see it with my spiritual eye? Because what happens is, if I see it from the wrong way, here's what happens. If my mind is not in the right place, and I don't see it with the right influence, then what happens is, when you think a thought, what happens is there is an emotion that you will feel about the thought that you think. And when you think the thought and then feel an emotion, that emotion will cause you to have an action or a behavior. Lord, help me deal with this. And so, if my thought is wrong, then my emotion about the thought is going to be wrong, which is going to cause me to respond wrong. Y'all look like I'm crazy. Because you got to understand, people of God, when you act out on a thing, it is because of a feeling and a thought. So you say, I didn't think about it, I just did it. No, you may not have let the thought stay there long enough to process it, but you thought and felt before you did. And so, if I see it through the flesh, when I come up against it, then what happens is I'll think the fleshly thought, I'll have a fleshly emotion, and then what happens is I'll behave in the flesh. And what I don't realize is that momentary event or behavior can cause me to miss everything that God has for me. I'm trying to just take my time because and I'm going to move in a minute, but you got to get this now. Even when we sin, because sin really is an act of lack of faith. Because when I don't believe God as I should, then what happens is it will cause me to respond to try to get gratification or whatever it is in the moment because I don't believe God, and to be disciplined. Y'all got quiet now. Because, and so what happens is, when something comes in my life, the doctor gives me a negative report. When something happens, I go to work and I get the pink slip. When I find out that my husband is acting crazy, and my children are acting crazy, when I'm not getting along from the school, when my grades are not where they should be, when stuff is going haywire, when the government is saying we got to furlough you, then what happens is if I don't see it from the spiritual perspective, then I'll respond from the flesh, and it can cause me to be in sin and miss what God has on me. Because anytime anything happens, if I understand destiny, remember, understanding destiny, nothing happens that God didn't think about. God, I got quiet now. You gotta understand, the Bible says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God and to them who are called according to his purpose. How can you say that, preacher? Because God has already sketched out your life. So nothing has caught God by mistake. Nothing has caught God by coincidence or off guard. He already knew it was going to happen. The Bible says the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. So if I walk in the will of God and stay in the path of God, even though there's going to be some things that might knock me down sometimes, if I stay with God, I'm going to get back up. If I stay with God, I'm going to overcome. If I stay with God, I might cry for a moment, but David said, weeping may endure for a night, but David said, joy comes in the morning. Look at your neighbor and say, stay with God. So you got to see this now, because what the enemy wants to do is to set things in your path to cause you to see it from the wrong perspective and cause you to miss God. Because if I miss God, then there will be missed opportunities. If I misjudge it, then I might die. I might become frustrated. I might lose heart. I might misinterpret it. I might run when I'm supposed to stand and fight. I might dance when I'm supposed to pray. I might cry when I'm supposed to celebrate. When I misinterpret what's going on, then I don't know the proper behavior. And then you got to understand, when you start moving in the flesh, you move in the flesh thinking that you have more time than what you really have, when in actuality, when you deal with destiny, attached with destiny is time. Everything with God is on a schedule. God does nothing that's not timed already. Y'all are looking like I'm crazy. So you got to understand, there's so much frustration and restlessness in the house of God because people don't let patience have her perfect work in us, because we try to get it now when it's not going to happen until God says it's going to happen. Job said he does that which is appointed of me, and nobody can turn him. Y'all look like I'm crazy here. So you got to understand, it's going to come, but it's not going to happen until God says it can happen. Just look at your neighbor and say, just calm down and wait on it.